Recording is on.
Welcome to the Global International Pedagogical Forum, IPF 2020, which I'm representing now. My name is Lilith, and today my guest is Arsen Arakelyan, PhD of Biology, Director of Institute of Molecular Biology of the National Academy of Sciences of the Republic of Armenia. Honorable Arsen Arakelyan, thank you so much that you took your time to participate to our forum and answer our questions.
Good afternoon, Lilith. I would like to say my thank you to the organizers of this event. I think it's very important, and especially to the chair of the European Institute for Educational Development, Evgeny Baranovsky, and as well as to greet all participants of this forum.
Thank you. At this moment, more than 200 countries all over the world faced the coronavirus infection. So there is huge amount of information about it, including true and false facts. And the very first question is, if coronavirus infection really exists?
I think what we see now and what we experience clearly shows that coronavirus infection exists. Of course, there will be always a lot of conspiracy theories about why this is needed for government or some parties or whatever groups of people, but reality is that we're facing a true pandemic of new virus, which we still are just trying to understand and trying to figure out the ways how we can fight against it. And more globally, I think that we have to consult to learn the knowledge from the trustable sources like scientific research reports rather than rumors and some comments in Facebook. And this is the very essential thing. So society should be educated enough to be able to distinguish between facts and myths. And in this case, the fact is that we are facing this pandemic.
As regarding the rumors and different opinions, many scientists says that coronavirus has synthetic nature, that it was developed in laboratories. What do you think about that, about the origin of the virus?
Again, plenty of scientific publications that used a lot of different methods in molecular biology, starting from sequencing, isolation of virus, electron microscopy, and using bioinformatics and other data analysis tools show that this virus combines few parts from genomes of different coronaviruses, which are infecting different animals. However, even with this data, the most likely scenario of its origin is the natural one. So unless we will get some new evidence of this particular virus being synthesized somewhere in laboratory, current knowledge suggests that it has mostly it really has natural origin.
Okay. So what is the situation with the pandemic now? I mean, what is the scale of the pandemic? How many people got sick at this moment?
I think the latest stats telling about something between 6 and 7 million people, which is really a very frightening number. And also, you said that almost 200 countries from 32 countries on our map are dealing now with this problem. Some of those countries already passed the maximum infection rate, so they are now slowly going down to normal life. Others are just climbing to the top of the mountain. And I think we are lucky that the virus is not as deadly as it could be with, let's say, in case of Ebola or some others. But this is a really a serious threat, and still we really don't know much enough about it. Uh, Now scientists arguing about whether there could be a second wave, when it could be, whether if someone is got infected, will never get infected again. And there are a lot of questions we really don't know the answer. But the situation is that we are really facing this huge pandemic situation, and I think numbers of infected people will still grow, and 7 million is not a limit at all.
So what to do with the virus at this moment? How to deal with the pandemic? Do we have some ways to combat with it?
Yeah, we're lucky to live in beginning of 21st century compared to the ones who lived in beginning of 20th century when there was a huge outbreak of flu and pandemic of Spanish flu, which took a lot of lives. Yeah. Uh, so first of all, in order to find out the ways to fight against virus, we have to study it. We have to study it in much larger scales that we do now. And this should be a multinational effort. Actually, we see that already. But anyway, more and more countries should be involved in research because virus can mutate, it can change its behavior, and the more data you get from larger population, the more effectively you will figure out the mechanisms of viral infection, and then you could more efficiently find the ways how to uh, prevent the spread of the infection. So the first thing is to do research on this thing. All other measures are the ways like these quarantines, lockdowns of countries are the measures that try to slow the spread of the infection until researchers come up with the solution to fight against this virus. And we are now in this stage. So you know that there are a lot of drugs which are being developed, a lot of vaccines actually are being developed, but this will take time. And until this time, this all other, let's say, non-scientific measures should be done in order to at least confine virus from the global larger spread than we have now.
Talking about the China when everything has started, so the China found out to be more efficient and faster in the fight against the coronavirus. Wuhan was very soon open, but many countries all over the world are in very difficult situations. So how can it be explained? What's the reason of that?
First of all, China is one of the leaders for research and development in the world. Basic statistics shows that they have strong infrastructure, a lot of talented researchers and physicians that immediately started to dig into this new virus to understand how it works or how it infects and what measures could be performed. The second is that a country has very high level of discipline, which sometimes is criticized by other societies which are living in a more democratic ways of life. But again, these traditions of behaving, not to say this is because of Communist Party was ordered everything to be closed or whatever, but the basically traditions of behaving and listening to the people at whatever level of government uh, help a lot. Plus, they also have for very long times, Chinese people have traditional wearing masks. You would probably see a lot of people in the streets everywhere uh, having Chinese ancestral descent, and they all are wearing masks. So this is very popular in Asia. So this also could be a way of minimizing the spread. But in general, I think efficient quarantine measures helped China to contain the virus within the Wuhan province or Wuhan city. From the other side, they had enough infrastructure to immediately jump to the development of the diagnostic tools to sequence the virus and to do a lot of research in this direction. Sometimes I think what would happen if this kind of virus will emerge in country without developed scientific infrastructure, and the answer is very like said. So if you don't have this everything, all the tools, you would probably miss the very first and very needed time to start to fight against this kind of disease. So these are few factors together. So this is behavior, traditions, hygiene, and strong science. Everything together allow them to have this very efficient way of fighting.
Uh, we know also that China uses a disease monitoring system based on the example of SARS. Is there such monitoring systems in other countries, which led the government to take immediate steps in the fight against the virus?
That's actually a very interesting question. So why China had this monitoring system? So basically they were prepared because they had few outbreaks previously. And these few outbreaks gave them enough experience to react very efficiently from the beginning. In Europe, in the US, people mostly don't experience to see this. So if you the last outbreak of whatever in Europe, probably I can remember this pathogenic E. coli situation. But long before that, there was almost no any outbreak of infectious disease. So Europe and US they were more concentrated on non-infectious diseases because this is also really a pandemic situation. Basically, currently diseases, aging related diseases like Parkinson, Alzheimer, cancer could be considered as a large pandemics in Western world because a lot of people died from these diseases. And the main effort was to find cures and diagnostics against this kind of disease. And because of that, there is this difference on priorities in healthcare in Asia or Africa, where still infectious diseases uh, affect more people than in Europe or in Western world, compared to the Western world, where infectious diseases like play much lesser role and much less important compared to the non-infectious diseases like cancer, like neurodegeneration, like cardiovascular diseases, and so on. So each model, the healthcare models in each of these regions adapted to react to the most dreadful diseases or events that happen. That's why we can see this difference between what happened in China and what happened in Western world.
Okay. We know that virologists from Wuhan University warned of a coronavirus infection and released into the world fully defined pathogen genome so that everyone could, as quickly as possible, develop tools for researching this issue around the world. So has anyone dealt with it in other countries? I mean,
Actually, yes, and actually this genome information became a source for development of dozens or even thousands of different diagnostic tools all over the world. This genome information served as a primary source to understand how this virus penetrates into human cells. This information also served as a basis for development of vaccine. So The fact that they were able to sequence and release the data shows how important it is also not just having the science at the place, but also of sharing the data. Because if they wouldn't do that, we would still know in many times less information that we know now. Because Chinese scientists they were provided everything they knew at the moment to the global scientific community. And I think this was a critical thing, and we should be very grateful for this model of behavior, which is actually the way how scientists should behave. For now having opportunities to research in vaccines, research in drugs, research in diagnostic tools, research in the models of spread and all the things related to virus.
So we know that coronavirus infection named COVID-19 is a novel virus, novel infection. But so far we know a lot of facts about that. We know that the incubation period that lasts about 2 weeks. We know risk groups, this men and women over the age of 60. We know that asymptomatic carriers can infect other people. What else do we know? What can be added to this list as far?
I think the most important things to add to this list is that immediate what you tell is more immediate effects related to the respiratory system that the older people get the course is much harder or more is more severe in elderly people. But the thing is that we are still learning is how then even people who survived coronavirus and get treated, what would be the late health effects imposed by coronavirus. There's already scientific papers and medical papers showing that there could be delayed effects, and these effects could be related to cardiovascular system, to blood coagulation system. At the beginning, we thought that youngsters and kids are not infected or they have very mild infection, almost asymptotic. But more and more papers appear showing that there are other syndromes that are developing in kids, especially related to thrombosis and disruption of vascular system in capillaries and veins, which is very dangerous data and very frightening data because these are kids and when the kids are almost always was much harder than when you are dealing with the grown man. And I think that this is not the end, this is just the beginning. So more people will get infected, more data we will, more knowledge we will generate on how this infection is affecting human health. But the thing is that, at least for now, we know that there might be delayed health effects, which are not seen during disease course. And this should be known.
And what about the treatment? So far, no effective treatment has been developed. We know that this is unusual flu, but we do not have a fundamentally new treatment. When will it appear?
So the optimistic people says or hope that we will have whatever vaccine, or basically vaccine. Mostly people are talking about vaccine in nearest future, like in autumn or something like that. But more realistic people think that we would not have working vaccine approved till probably mid of next year or end of next year. This is because in laboratories, a lot of things can work. So what is happening? Basically, you study to develop your vaccine in lab, you test your vaccine on on the cells infected by virus in a cell culture in a dish, and it can have or it can show like very good effect. But then you have to transition to human body, and human body is not just a collection of cells. This is very complex system, highly regulated, highly interconnected, and studies and clinical trials of vaccine on humans could take a long time, and this time we should have uh, easier way of probably dealing with the coronavirus in terms of treatment is to try to find out the drugs which are already in market that could also help to treat coronavirus. For that purpose, we usually do bioinformatics and then clinical research uh, by comparing the ways how drugs are affecting or targeting a known disease. And if the mechanisms are similar, we can suggest that this particular drug will also work with coronavirus. This is called drug repositioning. So I think we will get we more faster will we get an antiviral drug than a vaccine because period of vaccine trials would take at least 6 months.
Okay. And what about the immunity? What do we know about that? Does immunity develop after the virus? And if so, how long can it protect us? And is it true that people who have had the coronavirus infection cannot get sick again?
Yes and no in the same time. Again, because we are still learning. So basically, it is shown that human body are able to develop antibodies against coronavirus, and uh, it can be divided into phases. Like in first phase, the antibodies that react quickly develop, this is IgM, and then memory antibodies that will then later circulate within blood in case of new infection. IgG, immunoglobulin G, will also be developed, and starting from 6 to 7 day, it very the data is still varies a lot, but let's say from fifth day of post-infection, human body starts to develop antibodies. And the concentration of those antibodies become approaches maximum somewhere between 14th and 28th day after infection. So definitely we develop an immune response. The unknown is for how long this immune response will persist. So because we are just starting to study coronavirus, we didn't have enough time to monitor it for longer periods. So results in recent papers report up to say 60 days, but there were no longer studies, and we don't know if we go for longer time periods whether these antibodies will be there or not. For the second like wave time infection, again, mostly it seems uh, not very likely scenario, but there are already papers that reported in very few people this secondary, like not the secondary infection, but secondary infection with coronavirus again. So the answer will be yes, no, and we don't know because uh, we are different. The people are different. Each people will react in his own way, and the results in one population, in one group of patients, uh, most probably will not be fully transferable to some other group of patients. So we know that, say, in Europe, uh, people, mostly the elderly people dies and people with diabetes die, but this doesn't mean that if we take Armenians, we will have exactly the same proportion of people who died from coronavirus than we have in Europe. Even more, so the genetic studies of human, in fact, that patients showed that the main receptor which virus is using for penetrating the cell, the distribution of this receptor on the cells is different depending on whether you are Chinese, Armenian, or German, or from or any other ethnical group or country. So there are a lot of unknowns, and definitely say for the moment whether we develop full immunity and people infected will never become sick again, or antibodies will circulate for the rest of the life is not possible at the moment.
Okay. There were also a lot of opinions, conversation about the summer temperatures, that summer temperature will help us to stop the flow.
Mhm.
So the situation is so that we understand that it's not true, but the question is whether in autumn we will have an increase of pandemic. Does it mean that?
Uh, at the moment, I don't see the hot weather is a very again variable term. So for I don't know, for Sweden, 14 degrees is hot. For Armenia, 40 degrees is more or less okay. At least I like this weather, and it's really different. So what we do in laboratory, in order to inactivate virus, we heat it to 56 to 60 degrees. So definitely temperature and ultraviolet light will somehow affect the virus. But there is, at the moment, there is no correlation between temperature and viral spread. We will get data throughout the summer. And if we see that during the summer infection rate goes down, that would mean that the weather could affect it. But there is also another problem. So we should also be very careful considering confounding factors. For example, the countries that already passed the highest infection peak and now they are going down. So this rate of decrease, infection decrease, will coincide with the summer. So someone can consider that summer helped, but in reality, this is just because they already passed the peak of infection. We are kind of now climbing to the peak. I hope that we already approached it, but I am not sure for the moment. And also, we have a situation that there is a lot of infected people in India, which is naturally the country with very hot climate. So I think it wouldn't be the weather that would define the spread of infection, rather than mobility and time when each country enters the first stage of the infection spreading.
So, what are the measures to be taken not to suffer from COVID-19? I mean, how can you get infection and what to do not to suffer from it?
So the most important is to follow recommendations of who for individuals. We are not talking about countries, but for me, for you, and for so regularly wash hands, uh, wear masks, try to keep the social distance, and know the symptoms, monitor the symptoms for you and for your relatives or people who are close to you, and immediately report if you're developing symptoms to the physician. So this is what you can do to prevent infection spreading. And the rest, if you do this, scientists will take care of the rest and doctors. But this part is lying on us.
So what do you think? So self-isolation, lockdowns that many states impose, there are effective measures, there are necessary measures.
Well, that's the question. I really don't know the answer. There are a lot of pros and cons for lockdown or for not going to lockdown. We see more or less successful stories with lockdowns. We see also the model of Sweden when it wasn't like entirely closed, but just some restrictions were imposed. This is thing I really don't know, and it's not just one factor; it's a multi-variate uh, process, and we for surely we don't know how it affected. So at least we see now that in Armenia, after stopping lockdown, we get cases just immediately rocket up. But I don't know whether, well, even if I don't know whether in lockdown we would not see the same.
Okay. As you mentioned, many countries in Europe has passed the peak and the lockdowns are being relaxed. But is there a danger, is there a risk of second wave? And is it correct to remove the restrictions at all?
Uh, so currently, from 7 billion people on our planet, let's say 7 million people are infected. That means that it's less than 1% of population, or I'm not very good at math to calculate these numbers, but this is less, not the biggest part of population. So that means that there is a chance that the rest of this 99% of population could be also infected. And in this sense, probably lockdowns could be beneficial. But from the other sense, lockdowns could really severely affect the economy worldwide and cause another wave of problems rather than coronavirus. So I was telling this to my friends, I was telling this many times, but I'm very lucky that I'm not the person who should who is responsible for decisions on whether to lock down country or not, and how to manage this whole healthcare situation. So this is the things that I really don't know, and I think no one knows, and we'll get the lessons from this event this time, and I think we would be much more efficient when next time after another, I don't know, 10 or 20 years, something similar will happen. So we will be, the world on the global level, we will be much more ready for that than we were before.
And what is the current situation in your country now?
So currently we are climbing to peak. Uh, for me, it seems that we are already there or almost there. So we have, for a few weeks, we had very high numbers of infected people after releasing the lockdown. But in general, I think our healthcare system does a good job, very good job. And whatever happens not because of their, so mistakes can happen everywhere. Of course, there is not any country who did everything right. Even China didn't do everything right, and but they put Armenian government and Armenian healthcare system, Ministry of Health has put a lot of efforts to manage the situation at their best. So, and I really think that they are doing great.
Okay. Um, Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Arakelyan. Thank you very much for interesting conversation and your valuable opinion. Stay healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lilith, for conducting the interview, and I would like to again thank the organizers of this event, and it was a pleasure for me to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.